Modern commerce has entered a crisis of identity. The legacy extraction economy was built to scale life-saving resources through centralized efficiency. But that same evolutionary success has pushed the system toward a state of internal collapse. To interface with high-efficiency industrial machines, the holistic human identity was forced to fragment. We became isolated ledger entries, acting as investors on one side, employees on another, and passive consumers on a third. We internalized this fragmentation, often working at cross purposes with our own overlapping needs. Because legacy corporate accounting only tracks internal profit and loss, it suffers from absolute interstitial blindness. It classifies the profound labor of caregiving, community building, and ecological stewardship as unproductive zeros on a spreadsheet, simply because that labor occurs outside the corporate firewall. The World Bank identifies a $1.152 quadrillion baseline of kinetic flow residing in this unpriced human and natural capital. When one-dimensional corporate systems grind against this 10-dimensional biological reality, they generate a thermodynamic exhaust, a massive loss of value that cascades across the entire planet. This exhaust, known as the tetratic bleed, is quantified by 4 specific losses. We see $96 trillion lost to cyber friction in asynchronous supply chains, $315 trillion in synthetic sovereign debt, $275 trillion in unfunded ecological liabilities, and nearly $56 trillion in the morbidity and burnout of social decay. Reversing this decay requires a new cybernetic routing fiduciary, the Prosperity Co-Creation Corporation, or P3C. The objective is to re-engineer commerce so the machine no longer drives extraction, but instead responds to the biological requirements of the local edge. To prevent the system from destroying the human host, the machine must be structurally limited, returning commerce to its original physics of neighbor-to-neighbor demand. This architecture is built on a specific structural requirement. We must integrate the frictionless efficiency of global enterprise with the high-variance biological reality of the individual human. The model separates these functions into distinct layers. At the top, Layer 5 is the domain of supranational capability primes. These borderless entities deliver one-dimensional capability bundles, like global logistics, compute power, and energy, flowing as frictionless abstract waves. At the bottom, Layer 4 consists of sovereign capacity anchors. This represents the load-bearing physical mass of our world, the microgrids and 3D printing hubs that exist within the rigid jurisdictional boundaries of local law. The bridge between these two worlds is the human being, existing natively within the interstitial space as a 5-dimensional ontological node. In this system, the human acts as a kinetic sensemaker. Because the human lives at the physical edge, they are the only actor capable of identifying localized friction and authoring the demand required to pull a capability down. Without the human explicitly initiating this connection between global capability and local mass, the system remains inert. This structural lock strips the machine of its ability to act autonomously. To prevent the machine from seizing control of physical reality, P3C demotes the role of artificial intelligence. It is deployed strictly as an intelligence augmentation exoskeleton, a tool that carries out instructions rather than dictating them. Direct connection between machine optimization and the living world is avoided through a structural airlock. If the high-speed, one-dimensional machine were plugged directly into a complex local community, the community would be overwhelmed by the friction of that interaction. The PEIS membrane, privacy, equity, inclusion, and sovereignty, acts as this airlock. It filters raw biological data, allowing only one-dimensional zero-knowledge proofs to pass through. The machine receives the cryptographic proof it needs to execute a task without ever accessing the raw data of the human node. This secure connection enables a 2-part thermodynamic breath for global commerce, known as the 10-7-5-4-1 kinetic decoupling sequence. The exhale occurs at Layer 5. Global enterprises decouple from their monolithic physical structures, releasing their algorithmic capabilities as unbundled tools that can flow freely across the network. The inhale occurs at Layer 4.
The human at the local edge identifies a friction, like a failing microgrid, and pulls the required capability down into a localized socket, recoupling the global tool with local physical mass. At the millisecond the socket locks, the friction is resolved. The system achieves a tested systemic coherence, allowing a continuous stream of kinetic flow to execute instantly at t+0. By synchronizing the machine's speed with the living pulse of the local edge, the architecture replaces the delayed batch transactions of the past with a continuous, breathing flow of commerce. Because the interstitial space between global enterprise and local reality is so complex, this transition cannot be centrally managed or forced into the wild without testing. P3C establishes Zero Hive, a brownfield simulator that provides a secure, zero-custody environment. Here, global enterprises can safely simulate the unbundling of their capabilities and map their trapped fiat floats, without hitting operational or legal limits in the physical world. This simulation environment follows the demand-out model. Local communities use the simulator to pull, test, and re-engineer capabilities to build custom supply chains before they are ever deployed in the real world. When these solutions are deployed, they are protected by a biological swarm defense. This mechanism requires 67% consensus from the local humans, the kinetic sensemakers, to authorize any movement of data through the airlock. This consensus ensures raw, sovereign data never leaves the local node. Instead, only the cryptographic proof of the resolved friction flows upward to the four-dimensional pattern ledger. This continuous flow of proofs creates a record of the node's kinetic DNA. If a local hospital or utility is hit by a cyber attack, the node severs its connection to prevent contagion. Once the hardware is secured, the pattern ledger allows the local system to reconstitute its functionality based on that historical DNA. By separating the raw data from the cryptographic proof of its use, the system renders centralized data hoarding obsolete and provides a structural defense against localized cyber attacks. Pricing this kinetic flow requires moving beyond static market speculation. When a transaction clears the local socket, the Layer 5 yield calculator determines the exact value of the friction resolved. This is achieved through the yield field equation. The calculator multiplies the capability of the machine by the social demand of the community, then divides that by the physical capacity and local law of the region to set a precise distribution ratio. The resulting yield is paid to the human as Universal Basic Coherence, or UBA. This is an earned thermodynamic yield, reflecting the value the human provides by acting as the tether that keeps the global network in equilibrium with the local edge. UBA is distributed in the network's reserve asset, the Universal Coherence Asset. Every unit of UCA in existence is backed by the cryptographic proof that a specific unit of systemic friction has been permanently removed from the planet. To use the network's frictionless efficiency, global enterprises must liquidate their trapped fiat capital into UCA. This creates a permanent liquidity pool that gives local human nodes the ability to command the global AI exoskeleton to solve their own logistical or energy needs. As these regional hubs achieve the transition to zero settlement latency, they reach a threshold called Network Phi. At this point, the temporary Zero Hive scaffolding dissolves, and the region transitions into a permanent, autonomic protocol layer. To protect the integrity of this protocol, 92% of the voting equity is anchored in an irrevocable trust. This provides a structural defense against corporate co-option, ensuring the network remains too massive to be bought by any single entity. While the trust retains voting control to protect the network's rules, 42% of the total yield is bequeathed back to the local pillars of society. This provides a permanent endowment to fund the physical and social infrastructure of the planet. By structurally confining the machine to a frictionless exoskeleton, P3C removes the artificial compression of human identity. We yield the mechanical routing of the planet to the protocol so that the human is free to focus on the biological and creative potential of the living world.